Ekman Fine Art presents Monuments from Paper to Bronze, Part 2, an in-depth view.
Five, four, three, two, one. Landscape of Nations, the Six Nations and Native Allies Commemorative Memorial. 200 years in the making, we gather here today to commemorate the sacrifice and valor of Six Nations and Native Allies who fought in the Battle of Queenston Heights and throughout the War of 1812.
The actual public artwork installation was chosen by an anonymous jury competition and was the fortuitous collaboration of landscape architect Tom Rideout, of Fleischer Rideout Partnerships Inc., and renowned Six Nations artist Raymond Skye. Alan and Patty Ekman converted Raymond's drawings into the magnificent sculptures that we see now. With the official opening today, you will have an opportunity to finally experience this truly inspirational site with its expressed themes of remembrance, mutual respect, and reconciliation under this magnificent canopy of mature trees. Thank you, Tom, Raymond, Alan, and Patty, for your artistic inspiration and perseverance.
These are the drawings of John Brandt here and John Norton, you see here, that Ray Skye provided for us to do this project. I took Ray Skye's drawings and recreated them in 3D as maquettes. These maquettes of Brandt here and Norton were then cut up into pieces so the pointing house could scan them and give me foam to size. They are to be 1 1/4 life size, which is pretty standard for monuments like this. And here I am standing by the put together foam of John Norton, and he's about 9.5 feet high. Brandt was 10 feet. This is the base for one of them, and from here I'm cutting a piece of plywood that I will fit under that base. I'm applying the glue here, and then I, with the help of my son-in-law Craig, will apply the glued foam to the plywood.
Got it?
Got it.
How's that lining up over there on that notch?
We're not lined up. Where your hand is needs to come over here.
Oh, that's the notch?
That's the notch.
Okay. Okay. Go ahead and set it down. Alright. Okay, let's lift it up. And let's set it down. Okay. Now let's make sure it's registered right where it needs to be.
Then after we glued it down, we put some weights on top of it so it wouldn't rise on us, because it is expansion foam we use. This is one of the pieces. It's obviously a leg for one of the figures, and inside that leg is metal that we got from the pointing house. Not enough metal for me, so what I do is gouge out a little more, apply some glue, and then I'm going to lay the metal back in.
This expansion foam is really sticky. I'm going to lay it in, pull it out, and put it back in. Let those bubbles, let the air out.
I use these black steel bars for post, and then there's a metallic color bar that I use for sleeves that'll go in the base.
And then I'll fill some more in around it.
I also gouged out the other leg portion, the foot, and applied metal there to make it nice and strong. Then I sand both surfaces where the expansion foam rose up, so when I register these together, they're kind of flat. And these are all the pieces that we got from the Pointing House Moonscapes. This is obviously Norton, and there's lots of pieces. His coat, hand.
That'll be enough.
Alright.
You see those keys there?
I see them.
Okay, let's push it down.
Alright.
Lift it up. And push it down.
Down, huh? Wow. I like that.
Pretty good.
Perfect.
Alright, let's tape it.
Oh yeah, tape.
Really sticks to your fingers.
Yeah.
And your glue.
So we gotta drill this bottom part too?
What we'll do is register this.
Okay.
You have him?
Yep.
Get a couple more in.
Wow.
I don't think we need any more. I've got 2 more in case we do, but I think we're good.
With the aid of a long pipe and a long bit that circulates inside that pipe and this aiming tool, I drill a straight hole from the bottom all the way up through the top of the torso so I can line up my sleeves and posts.
Okay, now we got to go with the bigger bit.
Okay.
Can I go out his head?
Just the very tip. That was like, I was like, woo!
All right, I guess I got it up far enough.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get it on here. Okay.
It's a little bit on an angle, isn't it? If it is, we're going to have to tweak it and then backfill later.
Is it going?
Yeah, just about there. Good. Perfect. We're there. Okay, let's line it up. Let's move that stuff, please. How's it look? Pretty good, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Looks really good.
It's lined up.
Yeah. It was right on there.
Okay, let me put in the pins to hold it while it sets up.
Okay. It's like you're a magician sticking a sword in the box.
Pretty good. I think we're good.
Okay.
And that's how. Now we can go clean some snow off.
Sounds great.
I have different techniques for applying the paper to the foam. Here I'm using a mud gun where I'm using powdered fibers mixed with our various bonding agents in the right application. I can get a pretty good base for adding my sheet paper on top of this. Sheet paper makes it a little bit stronger, actually makes it a lot stronger. And if I want, I can shoot thicker fibers just to add texture to this ground section. After I apply the fibers, I'll smooth it out with a brush. I can actually apply more fiber as I go. And then after I'm finished applying the base coat, I'll put a fan on it. That's how we dry our paper, is with a fan. I'm going to shoot a little more on here and finish this up. I made kind of a curtain around because when you shoot fibers it goes everywhere. There's other ways of applying a base coat. Real thin paper works real good. Takes a little longer, but it probably bonds better. Now here you can see the bottom of Brant's legs. They're pretty white. After it's dry, it turns pretty white. And you can see there's a base coat there on Norton too. And this is the top. I'll use that sleeve we put in there, and I made stands that I can work with to spray just the top. And now I'm shooting top of Brant. I had to work on this foam a little bit just to get a little more detail in it. Pointing house will give you size, but they don't give you all the detail that you might want. So I can get more definition by carving it into the foam, and then a lot more detail when I apply the paper. Using that base and posts and sleeves, I can turn them around pretty easily. It's very lightweight, and then apply foam to the back side. Posts and sleeves is what we use to join the different parts, and actually makes it easier to keep it all together. Here I'm shooting the different parts of the foam separately, just to get a quick coat on there, and I can just brush it in and let that dry, and then turn them around and do the other side. And here you can see I've got Norton's head all shot and a lot of fibers on there. I'm applying bonding agent here, and then I will use sheet paper on top of that to work that all in and apply a little more detail to its face. And this is what it looks like after I've applied that sheet paper, and I can smooth it. There's a lot of water in there, and after it dehydrates it really does go down and kind of smooths itself out a little better too, but it's good to work it when it's wet here, and then I can go on top of that and work it again by re-wetting it and burnishing a little more, and that'll pretty much finish them off. Real quick application of paper. Another way I've found works pretty good to apply these fibers is to brush them on. That is oversprayed there. It's kind of dried on the plastic curtain that I have, and I just took it off and mixed it with water and mixed it with my fibers, and there's a little piece hanging onto the piece of foam there, and I just take that and throw it back in my container there that has my fiber and my brush in there. I'll just mix it in. That bonding agent has fibers in it, and it's recyclable. I can mix it back in and use it again with the application that I have here, because I didn't put any acrylic in it. If I put acrylic in there, it wouldn't work as well. Here I'm tearing paper sheets, getting what I call ready sheets, to start applying the sheet paper to my base coat here of fibers. And there's the bonding agent that I'm using, and I'll actually just spread it on my paper, let it soak in. This is probably a number 3 sheet. This goes pretty fast when you apply it with a bigger brush, and works really well and fast if you have 2 people doing this. It goes on real fast. Probably like clay in a way, because once you have the paper wet, then you can work it like clay. It does smooth pretty easily, and it kind of goes over the contours of the foam real well too. It'll re-wet that foam, and when you burnish it down, it really sinks in and bonds pretty good. Next, we're going to go to Norton's Brown Bess Musket. Alright, here I've got fibers kind of like really, it's a little thicker than when I shoot. And I just brush it on to cover this long, thin item, which is a Brown Bess musket, Shortland Model 2, that the British used. And I don't shoot this because it's so long and narrow. I get paper. I waste more than I get. And so I'm just brushing it on. This can be done too, rather than shooting. Shooting's just faster on bigger things. I'll cover this on one side, dry it, and I'll do the other side. Now I'm ready to start applying paper. I think I'll start with this one. So, use thin sheets. I'll put on one thin layer. A little bit on the bottom here. After I've applied the paper that I want, then I can grind it a little bit with this grinder and smooth it, because it is a finish on this musket that needs to look like it's finished wood. And after that I can fill divots with a little trowel, and that will smooth it a little more. The trowel kind of fills in any shallow areas, and I'll just apply these fibers any way I want and let it dry. Then I can go back and grind it again real fast, and it should be about where I want it. Now these pieces that I'm doing, the different detail pieces, will be very strong. A lot of artists will use actual real items and they'll mold those. We make paper that is really thick and hard. This is board, and I will cut this hammer mechanism for the Brown Bess out on a scroll saw. What a lot of artists do is use a real item. They use a real Brown Bess if it were a life-size piece, but this is 1 1/4 life size, so I'm going to sculpt the whole gun with our paper. I would do that even if it were life-size, because we archive our pieces, and you can't have a paper sculpture with a real gun there. So I always do it this way. I can take this board and really get a realistic detailed sculpture with it. After I've cut out the basic shape, then I can take a knife and start whittling it and get it just about perfect. I can wet the paper and burnish it down and smooth it that way. I can actually sand it in some areas, but I'll shape this hammer so it'll just be so realistic that it'll look like the real thing. Here I'm cutting out one of the ostrich plumes out of thinner board. I'm actually getting two out. Both of the figures have a large ostrich plume. I've traced the shape out that I want, and then I cut it out with my scroll saw, as you can see here. Now I'll get two out of one piece of board. We laminate that, our paper, our board together to make it as thick as we want. And it's a wonderful medium for sculpting. Here I'm actually scoring in the tiny hairs that you find in feathers, and then I will lay a spine in there and get back on my scroll saw and cut these apart a little bit. Later you'll see the finished piece. I've wet that flat shape, and I'll bend it the shape of an ostrich plume. This is some more board, and I'm actually cutting the fringe for Brant. He's wearing a fringe jacket. You can see it on the bottom here. We've got these figures just about ready to mold, but I still have to do some of the detail pieces. So I'll go back to cutting the feathers on my scroll saw. You can see I laid that spine in, which is another sheet of board. I just put it on top, and with the scroll saw I'm cutting out the basic feathered areas of this big ostrich plume that they wore. These are smaller feathers that go on Brant's head and as his headdress. I'm laying them up with clay. Because they're hard, I don't have to worry about damaging them very much when I lay up in clay. And these are the other pieces, detail pieces, that I've laid up for molds. And you can see there's his brown bess. We'll go around to the other side here, and I'll show you that hammer mechanism on this brown bess, and it just turned out really nice. There's part of the plate for the hammer mechanism, and there's the mechanism itself, and then the very end of his musket there, which goes in Norton's hands. And I use sleeves and posts to put that in his hands. There's Brant's feathers, and Patty's shimming up Norton, get ready for me to mold him. Here I'm molding Brant. I'm using a silicone mold for the main mold here, and I'm just going to brush it on. I decided I was going to mold these myself rather than have Sculpture Depot do it. the end of the trail was just such a large sculpture, I went ahead and let them do it. But I make a lot of molds myself. I've been molding paper for years, and I like the color that I have with this silicone mold, especially for casting paper, because then I can see how thick my casts are. So I'm just going to brush all this on, and I'll apply a few coats, letting it dry between coats, and I work this rubber into all the details. The silicone rubber here is like a syrup. It just runs. It's a two-part rubber, A and B, and works well. This clip shows me actually cleaning up the mother mold. I use a plastic on top. I've used fiberglass. I don't really like fiberglass. I don't like the fumes of the resin in fiberglass. And fiberglass is just really nasty to work with. And there's the plastic that I've taken off. And then the rubber will peel right off of that paper. You don't have to use mold release on the paper, which is nice. When you use mold release, it's harder to restore the pieces, and that's another reason why I like to mold things myself, because mold makers like to use a lot of mold release. They'll put it on clay, they'll put it on anything that they've molded, because it releases easily and doesn't give you any problems. But this doesn't either. So they'll use mold like polyurethane mold rubber, which really sticks hard to everything, and that's why they use the mold release, because it's just almost impossible to get it off if you don't use mold release. But the silicone releases really pretty easily. I also use a seal on the raw paper. I'll use a penetration seal of acrylic and a surface seal of latex, which really makes the surface of the paper very hard and very durable. Here are some of the detail molds, the accessory molds I call them, and those are part of the figure. I want to talk about the paper that we make. Here you can see it goes from like a tissue to really thick, number 1 to number 6 sheets. And this is a leather sheet. It's semi-hard, and the one underneath is for clothing. The leather sheet has an actual leather grain in it. And this is board and hard sheets. You can see at the bottom it's really thin, and then as we progress to the top, it gets thicker and thicker into the laminated board, which the top one is about 3/4 of an inch. The hard paper and board is really excellent for creating detail like you see here on Brandt's knife. The stitching and the quill work is all done with hard paper. This still shows the leather fringe and the detail on Brandt's pouch. And these are designs on his pocket, which are cut out of hard paper, and they represent silver designs that the Iroquois put on some of their clothing. In this portrait of Norton, you can see the fine detail in his hair and eyebrows and earrings that we created in this hard paper. And the hair was cut with the TupiCat that you see in part 1 of this series. TupiCat is an acronym for Precision Paper Cutting Assist Tool. TupiCat. The fine detail on the hammer mechanism of the Brown Bess flintlock is really quite easy to accomplish with this hard paper and board by cutting out the shapes and whittling them and carving them into the shape that they're supposed to be. You can create really fine detail. After we transported the molds down to Art Castings of Colorado, they will cast those molds in wax, and you can see how the detail comes through very well from the molds we created in these wax casts, which will be used for lost wax and bronze. In this shot we have some of the raw metal casts that were achieved from the lost wax method for casting bronze. Because we can archive our pieces, we can also transport them down to the foundry, as you see Patty standing here in the foundry with Norton and Brandt. And here is Norton standing right beside the other Norton, paper and bronze. Patty and I transported the paper originals of Norton and Brandt to St. Catharines, Canada in a 5x8 covered trailer, because we could use the assembly of these pieces on site. You can see the posts coming up from the bottom sections, and in the top section the sleeve, and then what happens is these pieces just telescope together. The coats overlap the bottom portion of the sculpture, and it is undetectable. Patty and I restored these pieces before we left our studio, filling all the shim cuts and all the seams, and we were able to do that seamlessly. But by the time we got up to Canada, there was still a little touch up to do and clean up, so we did that on site before we put them together. And here we are standing by Norton after he was installed at the First Ontario Performing Arts building, brand new building in St. Catharines, Ontario. This is really a beautiful building, and they were celebrating their first annual opening, grand opening, at the time we installed these pieces. And at the bronze installation here, we're putting the all thread in on John Brandt, and it'll be mounted to that rock where holes were drilled in and epoxy laid in for the permanent installation there. And then we also did that with John Norton. And here are some reenactors. These photos were taken after the installation celebration of the memorial at Queenston Heights Park, Ontario, Canada. Ekman Method is a registered trademark of Ekman Fine Art. Our paper and bonding agents we have developed over time, and there is no substitute. For more information about us and our process, you can contact us at the phone number here, email at alan@ekmanfineart.com, or check out our website, ekmanfineart.com.